Um, Good afternoon, everybody. Um, Shishir Kumra here. It's a pleasure to have you all in this masterclass today. We hope to bring in a lot of insight on regulatory matters. This is the first class, and the objective of this particular masterclass has been, as already explained by Mr. Sunil Bulkadia and as well as Jess, is to get a better understanding and also to be updated on what are the developments in the global chemical regulation uh, area, because there's been a lot of development since the European Union has initiated the REACH regulation in 2008. Since then, several countries have followed the suit. This includes Europe, Korea, Turkey, UK, China, and Japan, and now India. And there are other countries who are in various phases of development of similar rules, which is Vietnam, Thailand, Argentina, Brazil, etc., Eurasia as well. And what is very important to know is that all these regulations have a lot of similarities. They all are aimed at minimizing the adverse impact of chemicals on environment and human health. There is every time a possibility for a foreign manufacturer to comply with the regulation by appointing a local representative. Notification or pre-registration is the initial part of any regulation. Notification and pre-registration are initial part of any regulation, regulatory compliance, just to know what you have in market, what you're producing, what you're selling, what are the quantities, who are the downstream users, etc. Then there is a transition phase between which you normally are allowed to prepare your technical dossier so that you can process your registration. And then after the registration, there may be an evaluation process, and wherein some chemicals will be identified to be restricted or some chemicals will be identified to be authorized, depending on the evaluation results. All these regulations are based on the fundamentals of extended producer's responsibility, which means that a producer has a responsibility to comply with the adverse effects of their products, and therefore they are supposed to submit the safety documents, which is the registration document. And in case anything is wrong with those documents or any updates are required, they have to proactively update these documents on their own side. So onus is every time on the notifier and the registrant in this case. And then basically these are the common features of most of these regulations. We'll go into now the details of the Indian chemical regulation. There are two presentations on Indian chemical regulation. And what we have done is that I have taken my presentation more focused on what are the different type of chemicals categorized in this particular regulation and how do they impact your responsibilities and roles and responsibilities in complying with this regulation. Whereas the second presentation would focus more on what is the notification procedure, what are the details of it, how do you fill up the notification requirement, etc., what type of annual reporting is required, and what type of registration procedures are required in detail. So these are the two presentations in which we'll be covering. We will be covering now. And in any case, I mean, you can contact us with the given email ID that is on my screen now for any future questions and answers. Yeah. So the overview, this is based on the fourth draft of the Indian Chemical Management and Safety Rules. You may know that this fourth draft is already available for quite some time. We expect there will be an update of the fourth draft, but what we are covering today will be mostly general principles. The major development of the draft, update of the draft would be more not impacting the procedures and processes that we are going to define today. It may more impact, the list of chemicals and other things which will come up at a later date. So most of the things that you'll hear today will remain sort of valid even once you get the final draft. That's our presumption. Okay. And obviously, once we have the final draft, we'll be coming back with an updated presentation on the ICMSR rules. And we expect that the next draft will be the final draft. So there are four types of substances that are categorized within the ICMSR rules. One is the substance that are obligation to be notified. These are normally all substances other than the ones that are exempted. Then some of the substances that may be required to be registered, and not all notified substances will be required to be registered. So there will be a list which will be available within the Schedule 6 of the regulation, and that will be the substances that are required to be registered. In addition, there are priority substances which are based on toxicological and ecotoxicological classifications, will be identified as a priority substance, and these will be listed into Schedule 2. And finally, the hazardous substance, which are the subset of a priority substance, will be in Schedule 10, 11, and 12. So these different 4 type of substance would have different 4 type of compliance requirements. And you'll see, I'll give you a summarized version of it at the end of my presentation, that what are the roles and responsibilities depending upon different category of substances where you belong, where your substance belongs. In addition, we'll cover the fee structure, timeline, deadlines, and how do you prepare your company to comply with this regulation. So we'll start with the background to these regulations. We are very proud to inform you that GPC was engaged along with CII right from the beginning in the development of these regulations. In the very initial period in 2010, we have developed a lot of background studies and research documents for Ministry of Commerce and Chemexil. In addition, we were very actively engaged in preparing responding to various developments in the chemical policy. But since Jan 2019, CII and as a part of CII Chemicals Committee, myself and Dr. Mr. Anupam Kaul, we jointly prepared a proposal on chemical regulation and submitted it to the ministry for their review. This was a full draft of the regulation that we had prepared. And obviously, after reviewing, Ministry of Commerce set up a technical committee and adopted this regulation as an official draft. Obviously, this has gone through several modifications, and technical committee has gone into various deliberations of this particular regulations in different aspects, and then they have modified it. And the current draft actually stems out from the original draft that we had submitted in Jan 2019. So we are very proud to inform that this was the original proposal that we had sent through CII, which has been more or less adapted, and there are certain modifications and adaptations that have been done, which makes hopefully will come through by the end of this year as an official regulation. So what are the key stages of a chemical regulation which was going on in India? So there was a lot of discussion since 2010 on chemical policy. Chemical policy is primarily focused on development of the sector rather than regulating of the sector. So there is a regulatory aspect, but it's much smaller in that case. Inventory was being discussed in 2012, and there have been various projects, various initiatives, but I mean, yet, there was no finalization of inventory project in that sense. So we never managed to finalize an approach to finalize the inventory, and there was quite a lot of back and forth. Obviously, GHS ratification is yet pending. So we have signed UN GHS criteria in 2011, but since then we have not enacted any regulation in the country. So there was a draft regulation which was available, but it's yet stays as draft since 2011. And chemical regulation, which was the main discussion, started in Jan 2019, and it is the one that we are going to discuss now. So considering that there was no inventory, there was no GHS availability, how do you set up a regulation? So basically, this is how the things happen. So chemical policy yet remains the draft chemical policy, but chemical regulation, we expect that by 2020 end, this will be finalized. And the regulation has directly adopted the GHS as an external standard. So it does not need to, so it becomes part of the regulation now. So you don't have to take it as a separate development. And inventory will be created as a result of first phase of notification. So again, the inventory issue is resolved in this particular regulation. So you didn't have to go through 3 stages. You directly create the regulation, and then basically the other 2 would be implemented in process. So what is the legal basis of the regulation? So till now, we had two major regulations which were dealing with chemical. There are several others, but specifically with the hazard aspect and the safety aspect. So there's a manufacture, storage and import of hazardous substance rule, which is 1989 rule, which covers around close to 700 substances. In addition, there was the Insecticides Act, Central Insecticides Act, which covers around close to 400 chemicals. So, I mean, in total, around 1100 chemicals were covered, but vast majority of other chemicals are not being addressed by any regulation. So, we are not aware about the environmental or human health implications of such chemicals, and this becomes a major gap. And that was the motive to set up this regulation. And therefore, within the provisions of Environmental Protection Act, Section 3, 6, and 25, which provides the power to central government to enact rules, and these rules are being proposed under these sections. So, because it gives the power to central government to set up rules wherein there are issues that may harm the environment, or there are issues that may harm the human health, then they are free to set up some rules, and that's what being taken as an advantage here, and the rules are being proposed within those sections. So, scope of this regulation or this rules, substance is the primary aspect in this particular case. Substance means a particular chemical compound or an element which is to be notified or to be registered. So if it is a mixture, we are only talking about the substance in the mixture, not mixture as such. So mixture will never be notified. It will be or registered. It will be the substances in that mixture or a formulation. Yeah, that will be requiring the regulatory compliance. Substance in article would also be required to be complied in case they are complying. They are listed in the Schedule 6, which we'll refer to it at a later date. Intermediates which are consumed in the manufacturing process are going to be also handled in this regulation, and we will also go into the details of this same little later. So any substance that is placed in Indian territory through mixture or through article or as an intermediate would be subject to this particular regulation. Downstream users who are not manufacturer but they're consuming the chemicals or mixtures have to make sure that they are only procuring compliant, notified and registered substances. Substance in article, as I mentioned already, that any substance in article that releases chemicals above 1 ton per annum and they are listed in Schedule 6, then they may be requiring a registration obligation as well as safety data sheet obligations. All other obligations for the substance in article are not applicable within the from this rules. Intermediates, again, if they are listed in Schedule 6, would be required to do a registration, but it's a simple registration where only, below 1,000 tons we have to only provide Fischem properties, not all the toxicological data. Above 1,000 tons, currently it requires a full registration. We expect that this will be aligned with the European requirements at a later date. So wherein, I mean, greater than 1,000 tons intermediates are having a regulatory obligation of 1 to 10 tons full registration. So we'll cover that aspect. And in case you have any questions on that, please let us know and we'll try to respond that in more detail. There are no current clarity on polymers, which we expect that the final draft would address. Registration within any other regulation may apply to seek waiver on their obligation to register, not on notification. Notification is applicable to every chemical. There is an option for a foreign manufacturer to appoint an authorized representative, which is very similar to only representative as is addressed in European REACH as well as in Korean REACH or Turkey REACH. These are the manufacturer of substance in mixture or priority substance in articles, and the authorized representative will be responsible to take care of all the compliance requirements on behalf of its client, who is a non-Indian in this case. Foreign traders may not be appoint authorized representative. Very similar to EU REACH, foreign traders, non-manufacturers, may not appoint authorized representative, so they can't do the full compliance within the ICMSR. The implementing body of the ICMSR is proposed to be the division, which is basically, I'll come back, is a division is created, a chemical management division is created within the Petroleum Explosive Safety Organization, which is PESO, short form. And this exists already as a regulatory body, but there will be a special division created for chemical management in this. And it will have three main organs. Steering committee, which will take care of, it will mostly government officials, but will take care of more policy matters and day-to-day administration and financial issues. Scientific committee, which will review the notified substance and identify which of these will end up into the Schedule 6, where they require to be registered, and which of them may continue to be just notified and no further action is required. And then the risk assessment committee would review the Schedule 6 and Schedule 2 substances and identify whether there are further restrictions or prohibitions are applicable on any of the substances. So these are three very important organs of this implementation body. In addition, the chemical regulatory chemical regulatory division would have 8 units, which will cover various aspects of safety management of the regulation. So there's a chemistry unit, toxicological unit, chemical accident unit, packaging and labeling unit, techno-legal unit, priority substance unit, information technology unit, and socio-economic unit. So this will be the overall implementation body. Yeah. And they'll interact with you at different stages of your compliance. So what is notification? So notification is the first aspect in this particular regulation. And is it very similar to pre-registration that you did in Europe or in Korea? So we'll try to address that issue. Notification is applicable to all substances that are placed in quantities in the territory of India in quantities greater than 1 ton per annum. Very important to note that notification is not for free. There is a fee applicable to notify a substance. And we'll get back to the fee structure a little later in this presentation. Key data requirements. So notification is not just simply submitting what chemicals you want to notify or in what tonnage band you want to notify. It also need to specify, already provide the spectral detail, the full fingerprinting of the chemical, the level of impurity, the FTIR, the UV visible, HPLC, NMR, those type of details are already to be provided while doing the notification. Hazard classification has to be already provided during the notification. Use details, downstream user details, if any, tonnage band, and most importantly, the storage capacity. When you have a facility in India to store certain amount of chemical, what is the storage capacity, and then finally the safety data sheet. So these are the details that you need to provide during the notification. And the important aspect is this: these are quite high as compared to the pre-registration. But the good thing is that once you have done this, and in case your substance does not end up into the registration list, then you don't have any major compliance obligation beyond notification. Obviously, you'll have to do annual reporting and other things, but then you know that most of your substance will not have any additional expense, and not only expense, but also any administrative and technical involvement for them. So once you have notified a substance, there will be a completeness checks done for the notified notifications. And once any gap is identified, you will be given a 30 days time to fulfill those gaps. And if you are not able to fulfill it within first 30 days, you will get an additional 30 days to rectify it. If you don't manage to do it, your notification may be suspended, and you will have to complete the gap before you can start using the notification and be benefit from it to be placing the substance in market. So notification number, once everything is complete, you'll get a notification number, you'll get a notification certificate. Once you are notified, every year you are supposed to provide before 30th of January annual report, which will cover the actual tonnage, any change in information that has happened during the period, and if you have any variation in tonnage band. So if you change in tonnage band, then accordingly you may have to pay additional fee for the difference from say 1 to 10 tons to you are going up to 10 to 100 tons, then the whatever fee differences that you have to pay. Registration within other regulations and acts are also required. I mean, if you have registered in any other act or regulation, you are yet required to notify within ICMSR. So there are no exemption for notification if you are complying with any other regulation. And late notification is possible for new substance, but it has to be 90 days prior to placing them into the market. And for existing substance, we have not got clarity in the current draft, but we expect that there will be more clarity available on this particular aspect in the upcoming draft. It's very important that if you are planning to place some substance in India, you make sure that you are already notifying it in the first phase of notification. Otherwise, you have to, there'll be a long delay before you can place that substance into market. So new substances are very important because you'll have a 90 days gap before you can actually place it in the market. So you have to notify before 90 days. Yeah. So what happens is that based on your notification, the substances are identified as an existing substance or new substance. So if the substance is notified in the initial notification period, now we are talking about not a substance notified by your industry. We are talking about the unique list of notifications that have happened in the first period of notification will comprise of the existing substance. And if you come at a later date and want to notify a substance which is already existing in the existing substance list, then that may not be considered as new substance. But if that substance is not in the existing substance list, then it will be considered as new substance, and therein you'll have to have the 90 days period before which you can place before, I mean 90 days before, where you have to notify before placing it into the market. Now, substance to be registered. This is in accordance with too slow. Yes, sorry. Yeah. So substance to be registered. Schedule. I mean, these are the substances that are in Schedule 6 of the draft regulation today. Yeah. So the scientific committee and the chemistry unit will jointly screen the substances that are notified. They'll review the type of data, the type of hazard properties, the risk exposure, etc., and then decide whether these substances may be listed in Schedule 6. And once they have decided these substances are listed in Schedule 6, then any substance that are listed in Schedule 6 and they are placed in the market greater than 1 ton per annum will require registration. Even though, and this is applicable to intermediates as well as the substance that may be released from the article and they are in Schedule 6, they may also have to register these substances, those substances. So, Schedule 6, the substance to be registered, these are already listed in the substances. Though any substance that is listed in this schedule have the obligation to register, and the obligation is within 18 months after it is included in Schedule 6. So Schedule 6 is a live list. It will be updated from time to time. So the day a particular substance is added into the Schedule 6, from that day, 18 months, you have to register that substance. And there are no tonnage specific variation of deadlines. All tonnages have to register within that 18 months. Okay. And currently, there are 37 substances in Schedule 6, but obviously these are much of them will be added once the notification starts. Technical dossier is required for these registrations. So this technical dossier includes toxicological, ecotoxicological, environmental fate, as well as FISCEM properties in detail. And based on this technical dossier, also a chemical safety report is required in case you are registering above 10 tons per annum. And this will form the registration, the chemical safety profile, and then based on this, it will be later on evaluated by the evaluation committee. Registration fee is applicable based on, and this depends on the size of the company and the tonnage in which you want to register. Joint submission is an option, and it is a preferred option to prevent multiple studies, and also to minimize the cost, and at the same time also for the animal ethics, because several studies require sacrifice of animal testing on the animal, so therefore this is important. Any changes or updates in technical dossier that you have submitted and that you have realized that there are changes in data or information, that has to be updated within 30 days after any change has come in force. So once you have submitted the dossier, what are the key processes after that? So in case you have claimed while submitting the dossier some confidentiality, CBI means confidential business information. So if you claim confidentiality, for which you again have to make some small payment, those confidentiality claims would be evaluated by techno-legal unit, and if they see sound basis, they will allow the confidentiality to be maintained. In case there are no sound basis, that confidentiality claim would be rejected. Then the evaluation process starts. Within 90 days of your registration, the evaluation would be done, and any gaps in the evaluation in the dossier would be required to be fulfilled within 90 days. So you will have 90 days. Within 90 days, you will get the evaluation uh, done by the division, and once that evaluation is done and they say, okay, these are the gaps you need to fill in, so those gaps have to be done within 90 days. So there's 180 days time, but in case you don't manage in 90 days, then you will have to justify why you couldn't complete it, and you may be given an extension of another 90 days. So in total 270 days, you will have to comply with all completeness requirements of the technical dossier. In case you don't manage after that 270 days, within that initial 270 days, you may uh, your registration will be suspended, and it will remain suspended till you have fulfilling all the requirements that have been requested. Here there was a lot of inputs from other countries where they said that, okay, 90 days is a too long period to see the gaps, because till then probably you'll not get a registration number and certificate, and that would lead to a lot of delays into the organization setting up putting up the substance into the market. So that aspect is yet under consideration. We are not very clear about the situation, but 270 days is the evaluation process timeline today. So completeness, once everything is complete, you get a registration number, you get a registration certificate from the division, which is your proof of compliance. Then any update into the registration dossier is within 30 days. As we already discussed, intermediates and articles have to be registering if they are belonging to section Schedule 6. But if they are not in Schedule 6, there are no regulatory obligation other than notification. So this is the fee structure. You may need to know that MSME is one group here. So it is not like micro, small, and medium have different rates to different fee. They all have one fee. So micro to medium, everybody will pay the same fee, and large will pay a higher fee. So if you see, the notification fee varies depending on the tonnage. For micro MSME, between 140 to $3,500, and for large it is around 350 to $8,500. That's the notification fee, and then the same registration fee varies between 210 to $5,200 and 500 to $12,500 for large industries. So these are the variations, and these are the rates which are quite in line with whatever has been used in other countries, or even in it's much lower than that was used in Europe in that case. But maybe there is a possibility that micro and small may be segregated from them, and they may get a slightly lower notification and registration fee. But currently that is the proposal, what you see on the screen. Confidentiality claim, there is a cost of $75 per confidential claim, and there is a cost for large industries around $1,400 per confidentiality claim. In case you want to appeal against any decision to the Board of Appeal of the division, then you have to pay an appeal fee of around $140. And if you are a large company, then you pay $1,400. So now we come to the third category of substances, which are priority substances. So this is the Schedule 2 of the draft regulation. So priority substances are the substances that are categorized as carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive toxic in category 1 and 2 in accordance with UNGHS criteria revision 8. Yeah. And or they are specific target organ toxic with repeated exposure or single exposure, again category 1 and 2 according to UNGHS revision 8. Or they are PBT, which is persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic in accordance with Schedule 1 of this draft regulation. So if they are qualifying any of these criteria, they will be listed into Schedule 2, and these substances are considered as priority substance. So what happens when you are categorized, your substance is categorized as priority substance? So currently there are around 750 substances that are listed as priority substance in Schedule 2. Schedule 2 will be updated from time to time, as you know. There will be specific labeling and packaging requirement for Schedule 2. Import notification is required at least 30 days before importation. Yeah. And certain priority substance may further get qualified, further be classified as hazardous substance. That will come back to that in following couple of slides. So there are additional specific labeling and packaging requirement for a priority substance, and they may end up into as a hazardous substance, wherein additional requirement would be there. And then any importation of priority substance to the territory of India would require 30 days prior notification to the authorities. So evaluation and restriction of priority substance. So certain substances of from the priority substances may be, end up into restriction or may have certain prohibitions. Yeah. So it is decided based on priority substance unit, toxicological unit, and risk assessment committee. They make a proposal of restriction or prohibition, and this is further reviewed by the steering committee, which approves the restriction and prohibition. And the type of sort of recommendation that comes out is basically restricted in certain uses or it is totally prohibited. So if it is restricted in certain uses, then you may apply to the authorities for authorization to use the restricted substance for those uses. Yeah. And that type of authorization is given for initial period of 4 years, and later on you may again request for additional 4 years. After that, I mean, there will be it won't be possible to continue to do that restricted uses in the Indian market. Certain substances may be categorized based on, again, the steering committee's approval as hazardous substance, which we'll address in the next section of this presentation. Rules, any other restriction or prohibition that are applicable in other regulations would continue to apply without prejudice to any other. Yeah, so that will be the application. So even though there are substances which are not listed as priority substance or restricted substance in this particular regulation in Schedule 2, if the substances are listed and they are restricted in other substance regulations, those restrictions would continue. So there are specific packaging requirements for priority substances. So the design and the packaging is designed and constructed in such a way to prevent escape of contents. The packaging should be such that it does not react with the substance and create a harmful substance, and therefore, makes any, any damage to the packaging, as well as, damage to any external to the packaging as well. Shape and design should not be misleading to the consumer or general public, and the physical stability of the package is very important, so that it can take stresses of repeated loading and unloading and handling of such substance. Yeah. So these are standard requirements. These type of packaging requirements are also applicable to any other substance, and but the more important aspect is the labeling requirements. So manufacturer, importer, downstream users shall comply with the labeling requirement, which are again in accordance with GHS Revision 8. Product identifiers should be mentioned on the label. Hazard statement should be available, again GHS Revision 8. Pictograms, signal words, precautionary statement, and ensure that the classifications of priority substance are similar, and the pictograms and all the signal words, precautionary statements are in alignment with what has been submitted in the registration dossier. And these labeling are required in English and Hindi to be made available on the product. Finally, we go to the last group of substances, which are hazardous substances. So hazardous substances are subset of priority substance. So what happens is that Schedule 10, Part 1 gives the criteria, which is purely based on acute toxicity, flammability, and explosivity. Yeah. So these are the criteria that are given in detail in the Schedule 10, Part 1. And the substance based on these criteria are listed into Schedule 10, Part 2, and 11 and 12. So currently there are close to 700 substances, because this particular part of the regulation is directly taken up from the manufacturing, storage, and importation of hazardous chemical rules, which currently has around 700 substances in these three schedules. So these are categorized as hazardous substance. More substance may be added once the priority substance list and the registered substance list is updated. All obligation of priority substance are equally applicable to hazardous substance, and there are additional requirements to hazardous substance which are more than that of a priority substance. The one that you see in the bracket, that is labeling, evaluation, restriction, SDS, import notification, these are applicable to priority substance, and there are additional requirements which are here mentioned here. So transport of a hazardous substance would need a tracking and communication system and specific labeling, which we just discussed. Safety audit of installations within 6 months of its installation, with inception basically, and safety audit of installation within 6 months of these rules coming into force, and every 2 years henceforth. And site safety report 90 days before a site is set up, and these needs to have clear indication of steps taken to accident prevention, and what type of information, training and equipment, and antidote related information that is available to the employees. So this type of information is provided in site safety report, which stems out of the safety audit that has been done. Isolated storage and quantity threshold, as has been mentioned in Schedule 10 and 11 and 12, 11 and 13. Basically, there are specific thresholds that you can't store beyond certain threshold in the local site. So those have to be complied with. On-site, off-site emergency preparedness plan within 3 months of the regulation coming into force, and a mock drill every 6 months. And notification of accident in case that happens within 24 hours, and a report within 72 hours. So these are the specific requirements for a hazardous substance that has been identified. But these are, as I said, that they are directly, the ones that are already existing within the manufacture, storage, and importation of hazardous substance rule, which will actually, once this regulation comes in force, that the requirement of the manufacture, storage, and importation of hazardous substance will cease to exist. So import of priority substance and hazardous substance, there is a 30 days before importation. You need to inform the chief inspector of dock safety with the following information: who is the importer, which is the port where it is going to be imported, what is the mode of transportation of the to the port, so how it is coming, with ship or with air or whatever, quantity, substance name, and safety data sheet. So this is the requirement that needs to be submitted 30 days prior to the substance landing into the dock. And based on this, authorities may evaluate the risk and direct the importer on safety measures to be taken, especially while taking away the product from the port to the site. Then, in certain cases, authorities may stop the import due to environmental or safety concerns of a particular substance. An authority is also required to ensure the safe handling of the substance in the port. As far as it is within the premises of the port, it's the responsibility of authority to manage the safe handling of the substance, hazardous substance. Importer may have to maintain records for inspection by the division at any later date. Yeah. Transportation from the port to the site is governed by the Central Motor Vehicle Act 1989. So these are the specific requirements. Again, as I said, they are all the same of that as existed of manufacturing, storage, and importation of hazardous substance. So timeline. So there are key timelines. I mean, it's very difficult to give a timeline when you don't have a starting date yet declared. So what we say is that we consider that if the rules come into force on the 0th month, we expect sometime early 2021. So emergency plan is the first thing that is only applicable to hazardous substance that has to be submitted within 3 months. And safety audit, again applicable to hazardous substance, has to be submitted within 6 months. Initial notification period will start on the 13th month and will continue up to 18th month. Initially listed chemicals in Schedule 6, that is today there are 37, but in case the final draft would have more, maybe, I don't know. So once those chemicals that are initially listed while the rule comes into force, they have to be registered by the 18th month. New substance notification, again, will start from 18th month, but because there is a requirement for 90 days prior notification, so no new substance will be placed between 19th to 21st month into the Indian market. Annual reporting, 30th Jan of every year, and first completeness check of the registered substance would be on 21st month. So this is the sort of a broad timeline, and we need to keep track of when the things start. So accordingly, these timelines can be adapted. So how do you prepare for it when you know that this is a draft, is almost coming up, maybe starting of next year, end of this year. So what do we do till the regulation becomes a reality? So there are a lot of things that you can prepare, because I mean, obviously once the regulation comes in force, I mean, as you see that the initial compliance activity already starts on the 3rd month of the regulation. So it's better that you prepare it now. So we can focus on some of the things. Be a big or small company, you can focus on who are the people who can be part of a regulatory team. Doesn't need to be a separate division, but there could be people who can be sourced from various aspects of the existing team that you have, and set up a small working group on regulatory compliance. Prepare an inventory of the substances that are being handled by you, that are being used in your process, and that are the ones that you're producing and selling it into the market. Identify the quantity placed into the Indian territory, especially for the formulators. They need to know that there are 25 formulations you may make, but you're only using 6 chemicals. So basically, you need to know what are the total volumes of these 6 chemicals that you are handling on an annual basis, not the details of all the 25 chemicals, 25 formulations. So that is very important. So you need to know what are the quantities you are handling and placing into the Indian territory. Compile the information on downstream users. Who are the downstream users? What are the uses they have? Get the uses, ask them to submit the uses in case they want to claim a confidentiality, then probably the downstream user has to submit the uses directly to the division. Update your safety data sheet according to the GHS revision 8, which is a 16 chapter safety data sheet, which we need to update. So in case you are not doing it, then please get it done. So this is anyway applicable, and this is anyway going to be required, and the same is required for European Union and other countries. Remain updated on new developments of ICMSR, these rules, what are the developments, and we expect that there will be new draft that will be available in next couple of months, and we'll come back to you with all those updates. Training within the organization of the rules, if that is possible, or you can hire some of the consultants. We do provide a lot of training. GPC does training and consultation on ICMSR rules to a lot of companies, and we are happy to be of any help to anybody that requires such support. Substance to be registered. Then follow up very closely the lists that I talked about. Substance to be registered, whether your substance is going to be there in that list. So you can accordingly start preparing. If your substance is going to end up into priority substance, then you know that, and then you know the obligations that you would have on those substances. Or if your substance is going to end up into the hazardous substance list, and then there are additional requirements. So you need to follow, where does your substance profile fit in? Is it in any of these three lists, or it's in other lists? And if it is not in these three lists, then you have much better situation, because you probably only have to notify, and then you probably may not need anything until unless your substance ends up in one of these lists. So these are the summary of your obligations. So if you are, all substances that are put on the Indian market, except the ones that would be exempted, would require to be notified and would require to be having a 16-point SDS. Okay, so that's the first thing, all substances. Then if your substance ends up into Schedule 6, then it may require registration, and in addition, which requires technical dossier as well as CSR, the chemical safety report with exposure analysis, and also may be subjected to evaluation and restriction. And if your substance is further into priority list, then in addition you have to have the packaging and labeling requirements, which are specific, and there are import notification requirements, which is 30 days importation of any of the priority substance. You'll have to notify to the port authorities. Further, if your substance ends up into hazardous category, then you have a storage capacity threshold that you need to meet. You need to provide a safety audit. You need to have a site safety report and an emergency preparedness plan. So these are the various responsibilities that vary depending on where your substance ends up. So therefore, it's very important to track your substance, which of them will end up into the general category, which of them will end up into the registered substance category, priority substance category, or hazardous substance category. So this is what I had all in my mind to present for today, but I have few more slides, 2 more slides basically. So I would like to introduce you the GPC Regulatory Gateway, which is an important help tool for you, wherein you will have a personalized dashboard to get information on various regulations. So we are offering to all the participants of master classes to join this gateway for free. Yeah, and for at least for first 1 year, and you can join this gateway. You can see that we cover most of the countries with key regulations: Canada, US, Europe, UK, Russia, Turkey, India, China, Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, etc., etc. So we are covering all the regulations. You have a very detailed insight on these regulations, and you, as you can see, this is one of this for the India regulation. So you have summarized version of key regulations, detailed FAQs about those regulations, news items on those regulations, services that we offer, etc., and then basically other details. Yeah, so that you can process it through this particular portal. So we welcome you to join this updated GPC gateway, which is constantly going to be updated. There are a lot of things that are being added to this portal, which you will see upcoming release of the next version of the portal, but this beta version is already available and you can already log in and start using it. So with this, I'll end my presentation. Thank you all. For any questions, you can contact us on compliance@gtcregulatory.com and the website is gtcgateway.com. Thank you.